this is arguably one of the best rivalries in WWF history as well that doesn't get enough credit, I think, personally. I think because both participants of it had more impact on the business than this one did. So obviously you think about Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, that obviously impacts Montreal, and then, you know, the huge change in the Mr. McMahon character, which then feeds into the huge feud with Austin and McMahon. They had bigger feuds with other people, but this feud is equally amazing. This match is, I don't think it's the greatest match ever, which I think will surprise Matt, but it's my favourite match ever. I think it's absolutely amazing. There's so many bits in it, and the bit that I find really interesting is when the actual turn happens, and it's when Bret goes to get the chair about midway through the match. That's when the switch really happens, or at least when it starts, and a lot of the crowd are still quite conflicted about it at the time, and a lot of them haven't quite realised that it's happened, but that's when it actually happens, and that's when Bret really dials up the aggression and the nastiness towards Steve Austin. But because it's Bret Hart and he's still generally quite beloved by most of the crowd, it takes a long time for it to sink in. I love everything about this match. I love at the beginning of it, I love Ken Shamrock as the referee. He's amazing in it, because the thing that makes him so great in this match is that you don't see him at all in the match, despite the fact that he's this hulking double-R with the most enormous biceps I think I've ever seen. It's one of those things where you're like, he plays his role perfectly within the match, just gets involved when he has to, and then at the end, which we'll come to later, is amazing. I've realised I've started talking about it before you've actually done the rundown of the match, Tinky, so do we just go through it and see what happens?
I mean, it's fine. I imagine most people know what happens, but ultimately what does happen is Bret clamps on the sharpshooter with Steve Austin busted open in an iconic moment of WWF lore. Steve Austin tries to get out but cannot do it, passes out under the pain of the sharpshooter. The match therefore ending by a stoppage when Ken Shamrock calls for the bell. In a classic babyface way, Steve Austin never gives up, whilst Bret, after the match, decides to put the boots to Austin in a classic heel way. Ken Shamrock then has to face him down and remove Bret from Steve Austin. You get a little bit of a face down, and Bret backs off again as a classic heel as the fans chant for Austin and boo Bret Hart.
And then Austin refuses help from people and needs to walk to the back of the ring. Brilliant. There's a couple of bits that I really wanted to focus on. So it's the first figure 4 spot around the ring post, which looks amazing. It always looks so good. There's a bit where Austin runs into the ring post on the outside, and just the noise it makes is amazing. This match has got the best ever chair shot in it as well, which is the one that Austin delivers to Bret, where he swings it back and puts everything into it and nearly destroys Bret Hart. The bit when they fight around the timekeeper's table and they fight around the ring, the fact that the match starts with Bret Hart just going in, with the Stone Cold just going in and taking Bret Hart down and then just brawling straight away is amazing. There's like a great bit after that chair shot that I mentioned where Austin starts egging the crowd on, and they're still booing him, but there's significantly more cheers for him than there were at the beginning of the match. The glass shattering at the beginning, I'm going all over the place chronologically, but the glass breaking at the beginning and him walking through is an iconic moment that I don't remember seeing that glass breaking before, which is absolutely amazing. There's the bit when Austin's trying to choke Bret Hart over the ring and Bret hits him with the ring bell, which I love because you don't see the ring bell, and the sharpshooter that Bret puts on. It might be the best one. It's either that one or against Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 91. Those are the two great sharpshooters that I remember. The pass out, fake out, as I've written it down, where Austin kind of looks like he passes out and then pushes himself back out with blood pouring over, is absolutely amazing. Iconic is the word for it, Tinky, because it just is, and the crowd are absolutely electric, and I just think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely amazing. Austin walking down the tunnel on his own at the end again is iconic. Another iconic kind of shot, I think, of seeing him walk off like the lone gunman kind of walking away from a hard fought battle. I just think it's brilliant. Bret's got the great attire. It's classic black trousers and the pink shirt. It's just amazing. This match is wonderful, and what I always think when I watch it now is I listened to an episode of Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast that he did years ago, and he says about when you blade how hard it is to not wipe your face because you want to keep that blood on your face. You don't want it to go, and what you don't want and what you need to keep doing is keep almost irritating the cut because you want it to keep going. And just think about how horrible that feeling must be of having blood running down your face and be like every instinct being I need to wipe this off and not doing it for the sake of the visuals of the match. But yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. I love this match, and it's 10 out of 10 for me, and it's my match of the night. And my MVP of the night is actually Austin, because I think his performance in this match is absolutely tremendous.
Matt, let's hear it then. What does the Polar Bear think of the match that was voted for by the Twitter followers of the RWR Pod UK as the best match in WrestleMania history? And in fairness, that is not inconsistent with lots and lots of other lists and best ofs that have been out there in the world before. You see, I'm giving the big build up here, Tom.
And also, and the things I've got a feeling, I think I know where this is going. And also, just to let you know, I did not create loads of Twitter burner accounts just to bump the votes up in that, all right? I only had one vote, and that one vote went for it.
I think it's fairly well known by this point that I don't quite see Bret Hart as high as a lot of people do. I think that's quite fairly well known at this point. Now, what I will say to that is after watching this, I can see where I may have been a little bit wrong.
Yes!
Because this was the best Bret Hart match I have ever seen. This was one of the best matches I've ever seen and was amazing. So I'll give you that just from the start of this. Like, I've always thought of Bret more as a technical kind of guy. He was one of the best brawlers I've seen in this. The stuff with him and Steve Austin in the crowd was amazing. It felt hard hitting. The crowd were all practically drooling all over it within seconds. You mentioned it there, Tom. I mean, things like, Steve Austin hitting his head on the ring post. And I've never seen, wrestlers hitting their head on the post seemingly that hard before. Things like, Bret was like so, like his demeanor was just so angry and pissed off, and he played it to perfection. Just like at one point he just yelled at Steve to get up, and just the way he did it was so guttural that you could feel it. From Steve trying to use the cables to try and choke Bret out, and Bret using the ring bell. It felt like this desperate fight. The sharpshooter at the end where Steve Austin was trying to grab Bret's hair, that was great, to prevent him from locking it in properly, and him trying to, it just showed that desperation. He's like, I can't lose to this guy. Do anything you can to get out of it. The fact that he was in that sharpshooter for as long as he did was just great. This was just a real great piece of work. And do you know what? Like I said, for me, this is the best Bret Hart match I've ever seen.
I mean, it's not an uncommon feeling. It's very commonly held belief. Is this the first time you've seen it, Matt?
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you said it's his best match ever. I think this year, this 97, despite it being his last good year, is arguably his best year. Like, he's just, the character work he does as a heel is phenomenal.
It's so believable.
He gets to play both the babyface and the heel over the course of the year, which is just amazing because of this sort of unique situation they had where basically in America he was heel, everywhere else he was a babyface. That just made it so unique, so cool. Bret, he did that thing where for me, I think it's completely lost now in wrestling. And to be honest, it's been lost for a long time, not just in the last recent 10 years or so, but where wrestlers really tried hard, if they were going to turn heel or babyface, to justify it in some way to themselves so that they could actually continue to portray the character they had portrayed since that point. And Bret did. Bret found a way to justify this heel turn. And in fairness, it kind of naturally, it probably was exactly how he was feeling anyway, because, we know he takes himself very seriously, and he was starting to receive mixed reactions from the crowd. The start of this match shows that mixed reaction. It's not like he's being booed, but there's it's not a universal kind of, greeting of here's this hero kind of thing, as he had been used to up to that point. And certainly that had been the case since really his return the previous November at Survivor Series. Just wasn't quite getting that universal applause that he'd been getting. And WWE leaned into it, and Bret sort of turned heel in America, but not everywhere else. And then they had this this great run with Bret as the man at the head of the Hart Foundation, and the Hart Foundation kind of reuniting with Owen and Davey Boy and Jim Neidhart and Brian Pillman and everyone else. So yeah, for me, a great year. Similar, actually, strangely, to Austin. His best year was 2001. Like, again, in terms of overall match quality, overall stuff that he did on Raw, every single week he was phenomenal. Completely different role, heel as well during that time. But in terms of just pure quality, not necessarily selling tickets and pay-per-views and whatnot, best year for me is both of their last good years when they turned heel in a weird kind of way. So I just think a really interesting sort of time, and Bret was phenomenal. I think this is obviously it's a phenomenal match. Obviously it is a phenomenal match. I don't connect with it it in quite the emotional way Tom does, or in quite the emotional way I do with Bret versus Owen, or one or two other matches that Bret would have during this time, or indeed some of the matches Austin would go on to have. But it is a phenomenal match, and the mechanics of it in particular, in terms of the psychology and the stuff they do to make the crowd change their mind almost about these two. Well, not even really change their mind, that's not true, but just confirm to them that they should feel the way they feel about these two people, I think is more accurate. Like, there was obviously this sense of people wanting to cheer Austin, a sense of people starting to dislike Bret because he'd become much whinier and he, wasn't happy about loads of stuff. And they just confirmed it to the crowd, who were still playing along but were eager to not play along. And so they just said, all right, fine, we'll do the double switch. They do the double switch, and they do it in a way that doesn't require any major surprise. That's what I love about it. Like, these days, a turn seems to have to be a surprise, especially a heel turn. Oh, it must be a surprise. It must be this moment where they turn on someone, or they betray someone, they betray a friend or whatever. That's not what happened. They just basically showed almost their true colors within the course of this match, or at least the way they were feeling at the time. Bret hated Austin so much, and hated the injustice of the way Austin had been, and the stuff he'd done to him over however many months, and the bitterness had gotten the better of him and turned him into this almost sour kind of person that fans were no longer interested in, whilst Austin did this kind of never give up, never say die, tough guy kind of thing, which won over the crowd. I'm looking at the picture behind Tom at the moment, his background, and the crowd, the faces in the crowd are amazing. So there's a couple of people, one person looking a little bit concerned, another guy looking over the top, another one almost like jumping up and down, like, oh my god, I can't believe what's going to happen next. And it's the moment where Austin is in the sharpshooter and pushing up against the mat, and it's an emotional response. It's entirely emotional. It's about who's going to win this match. Can Austin get out? Come on, let him get out. And he obviously doesn't, and Bret goes on to win. And they do all that. They turn Austin babyface, they turn Bret heel, and Bret still wins, and he still wins cleanly. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal piece of work.
There's also another amazing bit in it that I forgot to mention. A little bit of unexpected slapstick, if you will, which is when they're fighting through the crowd and Austin tries to do a pile driver on Bret Hart, and Bret Hart reverses it and flips him over, and you can't see the actual pile driver attempt. All you see is the top half of Austin's body as he's going for it, and then all of a sudden he ducks down and you just see his legs flying, like going over the top of the crowd. Like I said, it's my favorite match of all time. I think his best match is the one with Owen, and the reason I think I said this during the WrestleMania 10 episode when I did my run-in, that the thing I love about that match is that there's no gimmicks involved in it. This match is quite gimmicked to some extent, but the fact that Bret still wins cleanly at the end and there's no shenanigans involved, I love. I think the reaction, the pop to Ken Shamrock pulling off Bret is great. But the other thing that I wanted to mention to you, Matt, in particular, is that, because obviously I don't think we'll be doing this anytime, go out of your way to watch the main event of Canadian Stampede if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
Because it is In Your House 16 Canadian Stampede. The main event of that is absolutely amazing for just a visceral crowd reaction. It's probably one of the most hot crowds you'll ever hear. The hard camera is shaking. It's so intense in that building. Wouldn't you agree, Tinky?
Yeah, but it's also not really a Bret match in the sense that it's a 10-man tag, so it's not even like there's lots of people involved in it, and you get to see a lot of great stuff from various different people. And yeah, it's more, but it is more about the atmosphere, which is just absolutely cooking because it's in Calgary and it's great. But the other thing about this match, so this is the thing I was really interested in. We talk about this, the road not traveled, quite a lot. This match may never have happened. Now, we don't know what would have happened at WrestleMania 13, and I actually took the time to listen to the Bruce Pritchard podcast about this particular show as well, just to see if he had offered any plan A originally for what this show would have been, because obviously this whole show is impacted by the fact that Shawn Michaels supposedly has an injury, but he didn't appear at this show, and therefore they had to change their plans. But Bruce Pritchard in that podcast says I can't remember what the original plans were, and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I'm not sure that they would have made their mind up by even the time, even though Shawn Michaels did surrender the title in mid-February, so well on the way to WrestleMania. I'm not sure they knew for absolute definite what they were going to do, because think about it, Bret was still babyface, Shawn Michaels was a babyface, Austin was a heel. At this match we've just talked about, they switch Austin and Bret over. Of course, they couldn't have done that if they didn't have the match between the two of them. So what would have happened there? It's all a bit confusing. I'm not sure what would have happened, but there's a very big chance that this match may not have happened, and potentially also, therefore, Austin may may never have turned babyface, because who would he have turned babyface against if this match didn't happen?
I think according to Bret Hart's autobiography is that he was supposed to win the title back from Shawn at WrestleMania, and you could have babyface versus babyface because they had that obviously the year before. But he didn't perform very well, did he either? That's why I think these buy rates are really important, because Vince would have been looking at that and going, that was at that time again the lowest of all time. This was slightly lower again, but that was the lowest at that point. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a bit of a sliding doors moment, isn't it?
It's a natural conclusion to think that it would have been Bret Shawn rematch, and likely Shawn would have lost, because Bret has in his book said that there's his idea, or at least one idea that could have happened, was that effectively they fought each other at WrestleMania 12, Shawn wins, they fight each other at WrestleMania 13, Bret wins, and then they fight each other again at WrestleMania 14, Shawn wins the decider and goes on, and Bret kind of, sort of semi-retires basically. So there's this sort of almost temptation to just assume that yes, Bret would have beaten Shawn in the main event of this show if Shawn had not cried off and been supposedly injured. But I don't think that's definite. I really just don't think that is definite, especially given what the previous year's buy rate did, especially given the fact that they have got Austin and they are determined now to turn him babyface because he is cooking on gas. I don't know how you do it without this match, and it wouldn't have been as impactful, certainly.